Tonka can fly, of course, and is good at all this
Yes,
stuff. So,
yes, I,
right,
I, I know.
right.
So,
Hmm.
I either probably he himself sees reason to accompany
I
me.
think so. Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
uh, that's what I would assume, and I would be very happy to have him with me.
You're
Um,
narrating,
mhm.
right?
I'm happy that he's with me because
Hmm.
my my goal still is to keep this as contained as possible because
Hmm.
it's wrong. Everything is falling apart, and maybe I can save some little bits of what I think are important. Um, it will take some time because it's quite high,
Hmm.
and I don't really dare to pause. So when I'm up and finally get in, I'm I'm at the verge of breaking down.
Yeah.
But I make it to Nisana Noted's office, and I'll be talking to her. I'll tell her that I have the feeling Hibu is still willing to communicate, that given that I really don't know what happened, that her offspring probably isn't,
Yeah.
and that I think it's paramount to keep information open, to collect as much as fast as possible, to spread it, and to get people talking to each other, basically in the same way we did at the conference. And then I'm just
Right. The
breaking down.
the good news is that Lexi and Ka's, coup has been stopped, which is the reason why Ka did not show up with a broadsword to kill Hibu, because Nizanalotu was able to shut it down. And so, although the situation with Hibu and the assault on the tower uh, is successful in the sense that you've you know defended yourself against the Talons of Light and you've set up a defensible spot there. Um, Given all of that, you still haven't quite managed to win hearts and minds in the tower itself. But still, the base of the tower is a different place now. That has changed. As far as Kixkol, as you will be welcomed back and comforted and fed. But the main point being that now is the time to treat Hubu as and Freetown as a force, right? A presence here, um, and to try to do for the Avix what the galactic community did is at least possible now. Um, as for Carnivix, well, you're not dead, but you are now in the position of a political prisoner, and will be a piece of the puzzle of what happens to the Avix from this point forward. But you are definitely um, way too you definitely are a figure of controversy. You know, even in you're too there's too many people who would not permit you to just be quietly done away with. So there you are. Um,
No, that's good.
yeah,
It's time to write my memoir
yeah.
and
I was thinking right.
get
Yeah,
all
or
of
or
that stuff.
comment from your your position. I mean,
Exactly.
I'm certain any number of people ask themselves at some point who let Desmond Tutu have a pen in there.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
So, cool. Well, yes, Helma.
Kixakol is wondering about Olmec as soon as she gets to her
Right.
senses again.
Right. Well, this is sort of follow up, I think.
Yes.
As in and follow up. Well, it wasn't one of the reasons why I didn't kill him is because that was a narrative of that was a narration of a failed role to do something, right? And so, or maybe it was a successful role and you gave the narration to me. I can't remember which. I think you
Yes,
succeeded, but
it
he
was
gave
a
the narration to me.
successful one.
But killing Olmec was not the stated goal of it. And second, you said I'll do anything necessary to do this, and so I knew that something drastic could happen to him. But I don't think I was mechanically justified in killing him. I just took it as far as what Jerry said could go. And so that means that he is alive.
I guess that makes her very happy.
Excellent. That would be very interesting. I could even see sort of the last shot of the two of them meeting again. For what dialogue, I have no idea. So Renee,
Yes.
and Jerry, I'm willing to kind of close it out and see how you guys feel about the way this falls out in the short term, at least for now.
No, you know what? It worked out in such a way for Konovix that he got kind of what he wanted. Like there's a recognition now for Freetown as not just, keep the lights on or,
Right.
Keep the toilets flushed, that there's a new power block in play. So, he's happy in that respect that that happened. And maybe, and 10 years, 20 years when he gets out of jail, he can, get a job as a politician someplace. He's cool.
Yeah. Well, if Hibu, is able to keep maneuvering, basically she's just going to keep trying to pound home that the AVIX citizens of Freetown need to be given a voice and powers within, in our government and council to make decisions and to be a part of the AVIX people because we are, stronger, unified than apart. So, and it's all about strength. And
Right.
that's, the thing that she's going to keep trying to find commonalities to bring together. But she recognizes it's going to be very, very, very hard.
It will, especially when you learn about the others who are the mutant Avix that the Freetowners treat as basically an unwanted refuge. So, a refuse.
Yeah.
So there's that too, which could have the way that the different groups were affected by the roles did not open the opportunity for somebody to release the others, which was a possibility at one point or another, depending on different outcomes. Anyway, cool. I'm thinking we saw a pretty good look at the Avix post-galactic peace. So,
Thanks.
yeah, you guys ready for the Mercap?
He's so fun. I know.
Just have to find that character sheet again.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a while.
Yeah, I've got everything. I downloaded it all. So
good. I've got it somewhere here.
I really had no idea just how complex this was going to get, and I ended up with a lot of really fun characters who cared a lot about stuff. So it was fun to, see where it went.
This was really, really great.
So
it was fun. I enjoyed this. I was hoping for more bloodshed, but
there was a certain amount. Yeah.
Right.
I do want to know.
Wait.
Yeah. Now this is another thing, just for among us. I know that okay, one of the things that I really dislike is the idea that everybody thanks the GM for giving them such a good game and all the crap, because doesn't work. That's not right. Doesn't make sense based on what we've been doing. What I wanted to know is, what did, especially Renee and Jerry, what did you see in the manner in which I conducted the word GMing? Because it was not the same thing that you've been seeing.
Well, let's see. The system really lends itself to allowing big things to happen without a lot of actual, I guess, brain power or effort. Like the fulcrum is really big.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can do stuff. The way the game is set up, you can do a lot of stuff without a lot of GM having to give you this mechanic or to do this and blah 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 and stuff. It's kind of like we're all in the same rowboat rowing in the same direction, even though we're all going in disparate directions. It still manages to move forward, as opposed to some games where they'll stall out if one character goes that way,
Right.
and then it's like, oh, how do we make it work? Or no, don't split up the party and stuff like that. I think it's neat that the intent of the action and the role define, I guess, what happens to the character more than, I guess, what the GM decides what happens to the character, in the sense that this role is this. I'm going up an elevator. The GM can't just say, well, you're dead if you miss the roll. You know what I mean? It's more like
there's actually there's some weird terminology I have for exactly that point, but for context, I was a little more interested in things that actually aren't specific to the pool, because a lot of things that I do in this game that I did in this game are exactly the way that I was the GM for the game Helma was in, playing RuneQuest. There was a lot more situational mapping and stuff.
Right.
But in terms of interacting with, in terms of my job, my actual job, the mechanics are different, but the job itself isn't that different. So how would a person play RuneQuest or God's End Agenda in the way that I GM'd this at this point?
Yeah. I think what's really interesting about this system and how you GM'd it is that, we all had our own stories, really. It was really individual stories happening at the same time, which was pretty interesting. And you had to manage a lot of different story arcs kind of going in different directions.
The nice thing was not managing it. The nice thing was just thinking situationally.
Well, true. You had to just, I guess, not so much manage, but keep track of all these characters and our interactions with them, because very rarely did our paths cross, funny enough. So that was probably the most interesting thing that was happening game-wise for me, is that this was very much our individual stories. And we didn't, even though we had the same story, they were happening in their own pockets, which I thought was interesting. I think the only thing I would say is the mechanic where, you get to keep your pull point, or you get to say what's happening. I think people get off light on that, honestly. I think if you put people on the spot and make them say what they're going to do, that's when you should get the pull point.
Oh, really?
Because you make them say what they're going to do. Because a lot of people are like, I'm going to let the GM do it because it's easier and I don't have to.
And I get to die. Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it seems.
There are a lot of games, some of which are awful, but some of which are quite brilliant, where somebody goes, oh, so this is the pool. Poke. And you poke a mechanic and make it do something like what you're talking about. And then you say, well, what else has to change? And then you find you have to wrap around a bunch of other mechanics or procedures differently. But if you do it, you end up with some of the really most interesting games that we have out there. So this has been kind of this little thing has been like the gift that keeps on giving, even though a lot of the output from it is terrorized by it and therefore tries to fix it, and then the game is awful. But I teach a whole class on this. I teach a whole class called Playing with the Pool, which is just about digging into this thing hard. And then the other thing I was going to say about that is that I learned a long time ago that in a lot of games where the characters are physically together, there's still a lot of waiting from person to person to person. And that in many cases, surprisingly enough, the fact that the characters are at different places actually doesn't change a bit about the actual time each player gets to talk. So it doesn't really matter if the characters are in different places if everything is happening. I mean, everybody gets to play as much as they did anyway.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's sort of an interesting. People think that if the characters are apart, well, then each of us will get to play less, right? And that turns out not to be the case in many turns. I mean, even in I can think of games where actually you would play less because the characters are all together, because you're just like sitting waiting for your turn in the combat order, forever.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. For sure. So that I thought that's why it's so interesting. It's like never really played in a game like that for that long, for basically a whole story arc. That's kind of cool.
The other thing I wanted to point out is that I had no big bad. Right? There wasn't a single thing to discover and a single foe to then go confront upon discovery. That's just not there.
Yeah.
And I would want to point out that although the system has its own features that are very important, the notion that I am not the story guy, I've got my jobs to do, NPCs to play, I have situational responsibilities that you might not have, although you guys contribute to that a lot, especially in those freaking stories. You write stuff in there, and I'm like, oh, so that's part of the situation, I guess, right? And so, but in play, I'm the one who, that's why I did the bubble thing. I was like, okay, all these different people are, up to these things, and wherever the roles like make them fail or make them succeed, or lead to that or open it up so that they can do what they want, then that's what will happen. But even that's not like mapped out like an algorithm, right? It's not like I know where each of those trajectories are going to go. The idea that I wrap it up in a way that makes everybody happy, that I took all the chaos and all of my, irresponsible players blither and whatever it is they thought they were doing, and weave it back into, the climax that makes perfect sense. It's just not something I bother with. So it's interesting to me that in doing that, you end up with a much more identifiable and usually original story arc than if you controlled it and were the story master who made sure that everything came together. Right? It's actually better this way. Yeah.
Like the pool would probably be a good primer to show that you could be, that you don't have to be as authoritarian,
right,
as a GM, because I think a lot of times GMs think, or they've been taught, I should say, you have to run it, you have to do this, you have to do this, where, even if you go back to playing whatever game of choice you decide to play, you don't need that authoritarian,
right,
I guess, hammer.
Yeah.
You can do a lot more, I guess, with like a net than you can with like, because basically you're just, it's like, okay, I'm just catching stuff that's being thrown at me, as opposed to,
I think there's
prescribing.
That's true, although there is a way of catching what's thrown to you and then generating control over it in a fashion that's still very controlling. So what I'm thinking of is more in the terms of, like I keep saying, jobs. And one job that I don't have is to decide whether what you say is any good to say in the first place, and it has to filter through me to be able to be said, right? I don't have that job. I also don't have the job of looking at any outcome, like a roll or what's said, if you narrate, and then saying, then having perfect perfect power over that, perfect control over that, to then say what happens next. I have to treat everything as constraints just as much as you do.
Right.
So if that's the case, then the fact that my scope of activity is different from you guys with a single character each qualitatively, it's not different. Right?
Right.
They're different jobs, but we all just intersect with the different jobs rather than, I mean, I am, the word I use is bounce, right? The way things change that no one person has control over.
Right.
I'm bounced just like you guys are. I have the scope of things to do, but I don't control the outcomes. I don't get to take all the outcomes and then go, how do I like Play-Doh them into what I want to happen next? Right? That's, I don't, I mean, basically, I don't even consider that play. How can you play cards if one person can say, oh, well, you just played the 10 of diamonds? You know, I think it's more fun for everybody that we're just going to call that the 8 of clubs.
Right.
You know, I mean, oh, guess what, guys? You know, we were playing to 50 points. 50 points was the winner. No, it's going to be 60. It's going to be 60 points. That's more fun. You know, I mean, I understand tweaking rules as you go, but I don't understand. But the constant power of being able to decide whether what anyone else said actually is authority, you know, has any merit. I don't want to play with that person. It's not
Right.
play. I mean, it's like playing with that card player. It's like, no, we want to play cards. We want to do this thing. It has properties for us that we like. You know, you can't sit there and tell us what's, you know, what the whole experience really is. And so that I call it killing the. I understand GMing, but I don't. But the GM has to die. Right. That's. So anyway, just in case you were kind of wondering where I was coming from and how I was doing this, and it wasn't just that it's the pool. You know, this is how I play. This is how I would GM the God's End Agenda.
Right. Yeah,
So,
be curious to see. These days we'll have to, or do something else. But no, this was. I enjoyed this. I enjoyed the whiffery of my rolling.
That's the other thing, right? I mean, since when are failed rolls so much fun? Right.
So yes,
You have to teach your dice.
Yeah,
Mine
teach
know exactly what a good story is.